Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Total War Warhammer 2. So today I want to talk by request a little bit about the Swordmasters of Hoeth, which is a unit that I'm sure most of you guys really know about and have seen quite a lot of, because they're a very popular unit, they're a very powerful unit, and they're very decisive in a lot of matches. I think that they have some issues, but I think that they are also a really great unit, and in my opinion, one of the better designed units. They're one of the most extreme cases of hyper focus in a direction in the game at current, in my opinion, and it really sort of shows that these guys are just here to cleave through armored infantry. They're not really meant to do anything else whatsoever. In fact, I would say that they're kind of a specialist designed to cut through armored infantry that are also anti-infantry, and there's a couple of reasons that I think that they're particularly suited for that role. So let's start going through the stat line. First of all, 6,000 hit points. This is actually fairly low for the archetype, but it's nothing too terrible. Like 6,000 hit points is lower than most others in this category, but it'll get you through under most circumstances. It's nothing catastrophic. And for what their intended role is, they don't really need to have too much more in terms of hit points there. Their armor's also on the lower end at 90. A lot of other units have 100 or 110 or something like that, but 90 is perfectly serviceable and is enough in this sort of category. Also, they have got a shield bonus, which is almost completely unique in this. I think it actually might be. Some other units have missile resistance and stuff like that, but these guys have got that block chance. This means that they can advance through some gunfire and take a little bit less damage, but I wouldn't rely on it that much. Their leadership, 75, is pretty excellent. Their movement speed is a little bit higher than a lot of others. This is where we see the distinguishment between these guys and a lot of others. Their melee attack and their melee defense are actually quite excellent. When you take a look at, say, the Empire over here, take a click over here, Great Swords, we can compare their stats actually to something like, say, the Humble Swordsman. The Swordsman actually has equal melee attack and lower melee and higher melee defense than the Great Swords. So generally speaking, the trade-off for taking these two-handed sword units is that they have really crappy melee attack and really crappy melee defense for what their price point is. This unit costs more than twice as much as this unit of swordsmen. What they're getting out of it is the armor-piercing attack, the armor, a few extra hit points, I think. But largely speaking, these guys are actually not very good at defending themselves against other armor-piercing units, and they're not really that great at hitting anything that has decent melee defense. The reason that these guys work is because that bonus versus infantry helps them out against those other armored infantry, and of course that other armored infantry generally tends not to have very high melee defense, so it's easy for these guys to hit other heavy melee infantry. By contrast, the Swordmasters have got excellent melee attack and respectable melee defense, especially with martial prowess if that's still active. Because of this, a lot of other heavy armored infantry with the anti-armor weapons don't have enough melee attack to easily hit the Swordmasters of Hoeth, so they're losing a lot of the damage that they would otherwise be able to easily get against other slow-moving, lumbering targets that can't defend themselves very easily. The Swordmasters are going to be able to block those attacks very effectively, and at the same time, because those units tend to have catastrophically low melee defense, the Swordmasters are going to blend through them really effectively, and this is sort of the effect that you tend to see when Swordmasters are fighting things like Great Swords. The Swordmasters have such a great bonus versus those types of units that they just mash through them like they were not even there, and they take disproportionately fewer casualties because those types of units are not geared to fighting units with high melee defense. You can even fight against those units with unarmored, non-armor piercing units if you've got high melee defense and high melee attack to a certain extent, so long as you've also got high armor, high weapon damage values, and some high hit points or something like that. Like Witch Elves, for example, tend to do okay against Great Swords compared to what you would expect there. After that, you sort of get to the weapon strength. This is where it's not really that special. But the bonus versus infantry is. Plus 14 versus infantry is actually one of the highest bonuses in the game. It's the highest bonus I can find for this type of infantry, and it's even higher than things like Graveguard or other one-handed anti-infantry infantry. Like, this is a crazy amount of anti-infantry power that these guys are given. Charge bonus, 20, not really that great, but broadly speaking, this means that the High Elves are looking at the Swordmasters in a kind of unique light. These guys are one of the, if not the best, anti-heavy infantry units in the game. But the thing about them is that's really where all of their power lies. The raw statistics, when you sort of strip away the bonus versus infantry, nothing that impressive, really. Like, we can compare this to a unit that's substantially cheaper than 350 points cheaper. The Greatswords have a lot more hit points. 840 is not that much, actually, but they've got a little bit more armor. A little bit less leadership, not that much. The speed actually makes a big difference, but they've got a little bit less speed. A big chunk less melee attack, a big chunk less melee defense. Their weapon strength is not that much lower, and their charge bonus is not that much lower. So you're not looking at a humongous stat variance. One of the more extreme examples is when we switch over to, say, something like the Beastman over here, and take a look at a Bestigor Herd. So a Bestigor Herd doesn't have that bonus versus infantry, which makes it a more generic unit. If you want to kill an armored monster, these guys don't have the bonus versus large, but they're also not geared as especially towards that idea. So we can compare them to the Swordmasters of Hoth. I'll do it this way, actually. So these guys compared to the Swordmasters have way more hit points, a little bit more armor, way less leadership, a little bit more speed, actually, way less melee attack, way less melee defense, a little bit more weapon strength, and a lot more charge bonus. Just in terms of raw stats, I would actually pick the Bestigor Herd over the Swordmasters if it weren't for that additional bonus versus infantry, in which case you take the Bestigor Herd, mash them against a unit of Swordmasters, the Swordmasters come out ahead. Quite often by quite a bit. So the reason that these guys really work is because they're so good at the one thing that they do, which is blend infantry like they were not even there. If they're stuck fighting even a little bit of cavalry, though, they're wasting a ton of their potential. I would actually rather, have the 2 units of spearmen fighting against that sort of thing. The spearmen actually have a very decent bonus versus large there of 15, which sort of puts them pretty close to on par in terms of fighting those sorts of units as the Swordmasters in some respects there. So realistically speaking, you're wasting a ton of their potential when they're fighting against monsters or cavalry. They'll still be able to pull ahead against the cheaper stuff, and they'll still be able to cause some damage because they have got that good melee attack, they still have good weapon strength. It's just not great for their cost. So this is a hyper-specialized unit designed only to kill infantry. What this ultimately means, though, is that if you're playing Swordmasters, you can't over-commit to them. If you're trying to use them as the sort of core center of your army, I would never take really more than, say, 3 of them. And this is quite a lot of points worth. It's 3,900 points worth of Swordmasters. So that is enough to say that they're the core of your army. The problem is that any sort of cavalry that gets on these guys is going to really muck them up. Even if it doesn't actually kill them or the Swordmasters win, they're not trading cost effectively at that point in time. If they've got skirmishers and they're sort of firing away at the Swordmasters, that's really bad for them as well. So what makes Swordmasters sort of work is the rest of your army that surrounds them, that lets them do their job, and that job is just to murder infantry. If there's anything else going on, that they should not be part of it. So I've got a battle here that I can sort of showcase a little bit of that sort of idea here, and kind of also the real degree to which they sort of rely on everything else sort of falling into place here. Now, this is an opponent that I sort of mind games because this is actually my second game against him. I won the first one as well, but I had actually a fairly heavy composition in terms of spears, and I think I had like 5 spearmen and I had like 3 units of the Sisters of Avalorn. So he lost all of his monstrous creatures really quickly. Just got burned down completely immediately from all the Sisters of Avalorn just chipping away at them really fast. So he sort of went away from the Monster Mash. And I wouldn't have gone for the Swordmaster build if I had thought he was going to Monster Mash a second time, and thankfully he didn't. But here's my sort of army here, and you can see that it's actually got quite a lot of stuff designed to sort of go around and hunt down the things that might potentially give Swordmasters trouble. Primarily large monsters, which the Spearmen are going to try and deal with, as well as the Fireborn. We've got some problems with cavalry. We've got the Fireborn and the Dragon Princes to deal with that. The Illyrian Reavers to go help out with all these skirmishers. I kind of have to win the cavalry fight in this particular case, but it's not too hard in this case, just because he's only got the 2 Cold One Knights. If it had been like the previous one, where he also had like an Ancient Stegodon and another Bastiladon of some sort, I can't remember, I think it was the one with the Revivification Crystal, I would have been in a little bit of trouble, since I can't tie up that much stuff while also fighting those Saurus Warriors. And honestly, he could probably have disentangled his Saurus Warriors from my Swordmasters while I was stuck with a Bastiladon or something like that. So in any event, yeah, we've got Spearmen here. They're going to be absorbing shots from the Chameleon Skinks. While these guys, again, have that missile block chance, nowhere near as good as the missile block chance of the Spearmen. They've also kind of... I think I've got the 12% physical resistance at this point, but I basically take no damage on these Spearmen, so I don't really give a crap that they're getting shot at here. They're a cheap unit as well. The Chameleon Skinks can use up all their ammunition, not finish. They won't even finish killing the Spearmen, and the Spearmen will have actually done something cost efficient in the process of doing that. So Spearmen are just sort of warding these guys away, stopping them from firing too much at my Swordmaster. My Swordmasters have taken a little bit of chip damage. I'm actually going to botch my charges because I'm going to be focusing too much on the cav fight. But the Illyrian Reaver is coming around from the back here. My opponent's sort of just all over the place at this point. He's dealt a little bit of damage to my Spearmen at this point. The Javelins are actually a better thing to fire at them, in my opinion. But, yeah, this is really important. I have to win the cavalry fight. Dragon Princes are going to do a good charge against those Cold One Spear Riders. He has got the 2 units active compared to me having only the 1, but I still got a really decent charge. And because of that large charge bonus on the Dragon Princes, as well as the additional sort of aura that I brought in here, all the healing that I'm putting in here, I'm actually not taking that much damage. Fireborn going to come around for a rear charge. I'm going to just charge Illyrial into these guys, sort of distract them a little bit. I get hit by a Tempest, but I don't really care that much. Over here, Swordmasters are doing their thing, and I let them get charged, which was a bad call there. Getting hit by, I think, Blood Statue of Spite, yeah, which is pretty good for taking down things like Swordmasters, and that's going to make a big difference for this particular fight here. But over here, you can see, like, Swordmasters got charged by Saurus Warriors with shields there, who have a decent charge bonus. 16 is not that terrible. But their low melee attack is just costing them a huge amount of damage potential against the Swordmasters, who are just butchering them. These guys are already down to 55. These guys are getting wrecked as well. Over here, Spearmen are just sort of tying up another unit, but these Swordmasters should have actually gone this way, but I was sort of worried about getting sort of too tied up around there. I'm not sure what hit these Illyrian Reavers, honestly, but they got wrecked. They managed to sort of topple into a bunch of Skink cohort with Javelin, though. So yeah, like, over here, some spears coming to help while we tie off all these other loose ends here. I'm going to try and get my cavalry out of the fight while keeping this guy engaged with the spears, which does work out. But over here you can see that his front line has been demolished by the Saurus Warriors. And if I had taken, say, like, another 2 units of the Swordmasters instead of the Dragon Princes, what would have happened is that these guys would be fine, but I'd have other units getting cycle charged and they'd basically be out of the fight right now. I also would have nothing that could stop all these Javelins from just constantly skirmishing me, so that would really suck. Getting Blood Statue of Spited again, which really sucks, but we are catching up to this guy here, starting to kill him. Getting into as many of these Skink cohort. I'm not sure why he apotheosis Skink cohort, but I think that was probably a misclick. Still firing away at these Swordmasters with that siege weapon there, but we've broken through. Over here I got a Swordmaster chasing after a Bastillodon with the Solar Engine. I was not thinking that through. I realized too late that it's like I should actually be moving the Spearmen over there. These guys getting bombarded by the Solar Engine. Over here, like, these guys, despite being severely weakened, have cut through all of these Skink cohorts. I kind of knew they would, but the Skink cohorts are honestly just here so that they can try and screen their general, because otherwise I'd have Swordmasters on their general, and these guys don't actually do that well against the general. I think he would have been better off skirmishing with these guys. I think they're also out of ammunition, but he would have been better off, I think, letting the Slan fight my Swordmasters potentially. I'm not really sure about that. It's a hard call. The Slan is really crap in melee combat, so even though he's a large target, probably actually would get beaten by the Swordmasters. Illyrial coming in to start slapping him around. Swordmasters coming in as well from behind him, and they're going to basically be able to tear him apart. Over here, Swordmasters, this is a pretty bad fight for them. They're fighting with the Bastillodon in combat there, and at this point in time, they're really not going to do that fantastically. They've already done a lot of kills. 71, it's still going up there. But at this point in time, like, this unit's too depleted to finish off this many Saurus Warriors while they're also fighting Bastillodon. Even if the Bastillodon is mostly fighting Spear Elves, it's just not going to go their way. But still, you know, it takes this much to take these guys out. They've already gone through, you know, Saurus Warriors at this point in time. So this one over here, they're sort of poking away at a frog. They honestly have no ability to hurt him that badly, but they're still chipping into the fight here. They're contributing. And, you know, Illyrial as well as the main sort of damage dealer here, so anything that can sort of keep a bit of the damage off of her is going to be fine. Over here, Spear Elves, Swordmasters, all this other stuff. Scar Veteran's actually doing really poorly here, which is kind of interesting. Generally speaking, I see like someone cast Revive on these guys, or Regrowth, or whatever it's called, I can't remember. I get hit by another Tempest here, which sucks, but fortunately it doesn't actually affect my Swordmasters, despite the fact that it looks like it should. Like, I'm not 100% convinced that this should not. Like, this feels like it should influence the ground units here, but there is no influence whatsoever on the ground units as far as I've been able to discern. Anyway, Illyriel's taking some hits there, who cares. Over here, Swordmaster's still basically fighting, like, to the very bitter end here. There's still 26 of them, so they're still doing quite well numerically. But realistically speaking, like, this was the Fireborn, this was the Spearman doing this fight here. I'd actually say it's just the, honestly speaking, it's just the Fireborn. Swordmaster's getting charged by this unit of Source Warriors. There's just not enough of these guys left. They've already fought against... Like, these guys have, I think, fought against 3 units of Source Warriors, so they can get run over by now, and I'm fine with that. Over here, these guys forced to chase around skinks that are out of ammunition. Realistically, it's not really that important of a fight over there. I think what ended up happening over here was Illyriel actually bitch slapped a frog, and that ended the game. We can see over here actually that is indeed what happened. But yeah, like, the Swordmasters really, there's not a whole lot to say about their performance there. Engaging and defeating Source Warriors multiple times because they kept performing, coming back into the fight, or they, you know, defeated multiple units there. They do very, very poorly against the Bastildon, against the Slan, so you have to make sure that you're getting rid of all of these sort of support elements so that the Swordmasters can do their job. If I had, again, 4 units of Swordmasters and, say, 1 less Dragon Prince, and the Dragon Prince is lost against the Cold Ones, well, at that point in time, I'm pretty screwed, in all honesty. I've got the ability to engage and feed his front line really decisively, but what's going to happen is he's going to lose those units. They're going to kite backwards. Kink's cohort with javelins are going to start pelting me with a whole bunch of javelins. Camille and Skinks are going to tear me apart with their things. And he's going to be rear charging me with Cold Wind Spear Riders every time he gets a chance to stop me from reforming my lines. So I'm going to start losing all these Swordmasters to those sort of cheaper units if I had lost that cavalry fight. So the thing about the Swordmasters is that they're a decisive tool. They will win you the fight and they will beat the enemy, but you have to destroy all the things that are getting in the way of them doing their job first. Otherwise, they're just not going to be able to do it. And that includes things like missile units, artillery, and cavalry. And if you're up against somebody who's got tons of, like, really good artillery, like the Empire currently, especially with Net of Ammontok, you're looking at a fight where you're probably not going to be able to win it using Swordmasters, so I tend not to use them in those situations. But they will do a fantastic job against a lot of units out there, and they're just a really good all-around anti-infantry unit. I'm not sure how often I would ever consider taking them as the core of my army like I did here. I did it for demonstration purposes mostly. The most I usually want to take is 2 units, which is already quite a commitment to Swordmasters. But they are better sort of as a unit to destroy a flank and then sort of turn the rest inwards. The only problem is that the Hives have no center line because the Spear Elves are shit, so you end up in a situation where they kind of like pull double duty of like they've smashed through the units on the flanks and then they sort of turn inwards to realize that their center is routed, so they go chasing after the enemy's center and then destroy it too. So it's kind of a weird situation with the Swordmasters in that sort of sense there. The Dryads, for the record, don't help at all. The Dryads don't have enough leadership or enough staying power to stick it into a fight for very long, so they just tend to run off really quickly. But yeah, the Swordmasters, I think, are just a fantastic unit still. They're one that people sort of know about, and they've largely figured ways around them and how to defeat them anyway. But if you have the right kind of tools set up there and the right kind of mindset going into the fight, you're going to be able to win anyway. So anyway, hope you found this video enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.